The Supreme Court striking down President Biden's student loan forgiveness program today. The ruling blocks the president's plan to cancel $430 billion in debt. That was a campaign promise affecting more than 40 million Americans. Those who carry student loan debt will now have to start repaying those loans in October. So what should you be doing now? Joining us now is Mitlin Financial founder and author of Financial Planning Made Personal, Lawrence Sprung. Lawrence, I'd imagine you've probably gotten a lot of calls from those students who have to repay those loans to say, well, what does this now mean for my finances if we're talking about monthly payments of upwards of $300-400?
Sure. Great point. And thank you for having me. We thankfully have not been getting those calls personally because we've worked with these young individuals to make sure that if they were in this situation, that they had a plan. And we've been working with them under the expectation of a worst case scenario that this debt was not going to go away and they would have to resume payments come October of this year. So, that is a hugely impactful and beneficial way of attacking things. Now, if you haven't done that, that's something you certainly should start thinking about today.
And Lawrence, just more specifically on that, digging down into exactly what that plan looks like, what's the first couple of steps that people should be taking right now?
Yeah, so even the folks that we started with a plan when this was first announced, we obviously have been revisiting it in recent weeks in expectation of this announcement coming out. And now what we're in the process of doing is relooking at their situation, putting a plan together, looking at their budget. It's going to be very important to make sure that we take a look at how much money they have coming in, because that could have changed in the environment in the last 3 years, where their money is going out each month and those expenses to make sure that they're going to have sufficient cash flow to pay for these payments as they restart. Now, if they're in a situation where that number is not in a situation where they're going to be able to repay, it's important that we look at those expenses with a fine-tooth comb and see what may be able to be extinguished. What subscriptions do you have that you're paying for that you may be able to get rid of? What other expenses will you maybe have the opportunity to reduce to make room for these upcoming payments?
Yeah, so it is about shaving down your expenses, sort of just looking at what that personal balance sheet looks like. But when you think about it, a lot of students, today we're talking about the president's student loan forgiveness program, but there's also been the COVID-related payment pause. There's a lot of students out there who graduated from college who haven't had to pay anything for 3 years. If you are in that position where suddenly you're faced with that, but can't necessarily meet those payments, what are the other options?
I think you have to start looking at all of your options, which may be looking at other ways to refinance that debt, other opportunities where you can move it maybe to a private lender. All bets are on the table at that point. It's something that's certainly new, but again, this is why you have to have, and we talk about it here at our firm all the time, it's so important to have a plan because you don't want these things to creep up on you. It's important that you look at all of your options and make a decision that's what's in your best interest, whether it be a private loan or looking to extinguish the debt in some other way. But the bottom line is, either way, these payments are coming and you have to be prepared to start paying them or pay off the debt.
Lawrence, what do you think the roadmap from here on out looks like? Because we know President Biden, he's going to face even more pressure to get something passed, get something that will be able to be upheld. Is any future negotiations, is that off the table?
Listen, I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is that there are other options that exist, but it wouldn't be through the HERO Act, which is where he tried to enact this initially. It would have to be through some other kind of legislation or congressional action. I think of the likelihood of that taking place this late in his term. I find it highly unlikely that there's going to be a plan B and this is going to be addressed again. What I would like to see, however, is a greater plan to attack the student loan debt situation as a whole, because although this was going to extinguish about $500 billion or $500 billion in debt, we have a $2 trillion problem, which even after this, whether it was extinguished or not, is going to continue.
Lawrence, I want to get back to something you said there about the potential for other options, including private loans. And obviously, your clients have been looking ahead. They've been preparing for the worst, but not everybody has been there. Is that an option that you would advise on?
Well, I think you have to be a little careful with that, because if there is some kind of option B for some kind of abatement on these on the debt, then once you move it to a private loan, you're going to be out of the mix for that debt. So you have to make a personal decision as to whether or not you are willing to risk that. And you also have to weigh the benefits and the disadvantages. Maybe there are better rates, maybe there aren't. And, we're not in a situation where we were 3 years ago, where interest rates were extremely low. They've creeped up quite a bit. So that's got to be part of the conversation as well.
Lawrence, from the conversations that you're having, you mentioned the fact that this doesn't, obviously, the $20,000 of forgiveness that President Biden was pursuing, that it doesn't address what's at the crux of this issue here. The conversations that you've had with these students, are they rethinking higher education? Are they maybe stepping back and pausing just in terms of what makes the most financial sense here for them to do at this point?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I do think that's the case. I think we're seeing more folks that are exploring the options of trade and technical schools, which are great options. I think we've created this construct in this country that, you have to go to college, that you go to high school, and then that's the natural order. And, the trades have suffered as a result of that. And there's great opportunity for people who are willing to go down that route. And they could come out of high school learning a skill, earn a very good living, and not have the opportunity to amass this debt. So I think that a lot of folks, when they're exploring higher education, should certainly take that into account and really make their decision on whether college or whatever route they want to take is right for them, based upon due diligence, not based upon where they want to go, the sunshine environment, good football team. There has to be a return on investment there, and it has to be looked at. Many folks spend more time evaluating, what car they're going to buy and whether that makes sense and what, features and benefits they're going to get than they do when it comes to higher education.
What does that return on investment look like when you compare it to a four-year university to potentially some of those trade schools you just mentioned? What's the discrepancy? Because the argument has been that, at least regardless of what your decision is, when you are valued in the labor market, that four-year degree still holds value in that you can command a higher salary.
Yeah, I think that that's a valid point, but I also think that this has been a construct that's been created by the environment we're in. And I think one of the culprits of the student loan crisis are the schools themselves. They are great marketing machines who are telling our students and our young folks that what you just mentioned is exactly the case. I do not feel that's the case, because if you look at it side by side, the person who goes to trade school or whatever route they take is starting with a clean slate. They're not going to have any debt, and their earning potential starts immediately. And I think at the end of the day, they can end up in a similar position whether they go to college and get the four-year degree or not. And, it's really a personal decision. Some careers may need that four-year degree and may need higher education. Others may not. So it's really, like I wrote in my book, financial planning is personal. It's very personal. And I think it's a decision that has to be made with a lot of factors in mind, and not just, where should I go to school? What's the environment I want to be in? It really has to look at what is the return on my investment. And I did this personally myself. I have one son right now in college. He's a sophomore, and one son looking at school in the next couple of years.
Certainly very, very important points to take into account. Lawrence Sprung, great to talk to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much.